Hi, welcome back to the Bookwanderers Club. This is series 2. Some of you perhaps watched series 1, as I'm now calling it, which was what we did in kind of March to May last year during the first lockdown while schools were closed. But there is a new lockdown, so we are back. I am back. The Bookwanderers Club is back. We've got a bit of a different format. So last time I did 3 live videos with one author each time, 3 times a week. This time we're doing it a little bit differently. There's going to be a new episode every 2 weeks on a Friday, which is going to feature 3 author interviews as well as a few other bits and pieces. This is episode 1, the very first episode of this new format, and I have got some brilliant authors for you. So to kick things off, we have Joseph Elliott. Now, Joseph is the author of the Shadow Sky series. The first book in the series was The Good Hawk, which came out last year, and the new book is this one, The Broken Raven, which has just come out now. Joseph is taking part in the Big Questions interview. Now, I have asked a class, year 5 from St Bernadette School, to send me some questions that they would like to put to an author, anything that's on their mind. Some of them about reading, writing, some of them about completely different things. So without further ado, here is Joseph Elliott answering your big questions. So welcome to the Bookwanderers Club, Joseph. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So to kick off, before we get into our big questions from year 5, I'd love for you to be able to just tell us a bit about the world you've created, The Good Hawk, and maybe give us some clues for what we can expect to find in The Broken Raven.
Yeah, of course. The Good Hawk is the first book in the Shadow Sky trilogy. It's set in a mythical version of Scotland. And it's about a clan that live on the Isle of Skye that get invaded and enslaved. And then the only people to avoid capture are a 15-year-old girl with Down syndrome called Agatha and a 14-year-old boy called Jamie, who then have to go on an adventure across the mainland to try and rescue their clan. And it's an adventure filled with magical creatures and dark shadows, and it's a bit of a wild ride. And then the sequel, The Broken Raven, that's just come out, kind of follows on about a month after the events in The Good Hawk. So without giving away too many spoilers, it features a brand new character as well as lots of the returning characters from the first book. The new character is called Sigrid. She's a 12-year-old Norwegian girl, and she's awesome. She's really kind of feisty. She doesn't take any prisoners. She speaks her mind, and I can't wait for people to meet her because she's awesome.
Amazing. It is fun, isn't it, when you write series, like you have your, I quite like, it's like the comfort blanket of your characters that you know well, but it's fun being able to kind of add in these extra elements. I feel sometimes it's not fair to my like core characters because I get excited by my new characters who get to come in and be exciting just for one book.
Yeah, I totally feel that. It's always wonderful about writing the second book is having that world and those characters already there. And it's like a playground. You can then just dive in and be like, okay, this is all done, all the groundwork. Yeah. Now, where can we go with this that's new? Who can we introduce? Yeah. What fun can we have? Right,
so this is officially the big questions segment that Joseph's very kindly agreed to do. So we obviously aren't doing school visits at the moment. One of the things I love about going into schools is the questions that you get at the end. And so I wanted to try and recreate some of that. So I have asked year 5 at St Bernadette School to send me some questions. Now, I have said they can be about writing, but they don't have to be. It can be whatever is on their mind. So we've got a mix of reading and writing questions with just some other things that they have been thinking about. So are you ready?
On the unpredictability.
Okay. Now the first question, actually, I think Soliana has been reading Pages & Co because she would like to know, if you could step into any children's book, what would it be and why?
Oh, that is a great question. I think it would have to be Garth Nix's Sabriel from the Old Kingdom series, because that was one of my favorite books growing up, and I mean, I should put the caveat that I would only want to step into it if I could step back
Yeah.
out there, because it's a pretty dangerous world. But yeah, to be able to meet those characters and to go into the afterworld like Sabriel does, just to experience it would be a very cool adventure.
Okay, amazing. Now, Jithin would like to know what snacks you eat while you read.
And while I read, I am, well, having just been Christmas, I'm a big fan of a mince pie. So I have been eating all of the mince pies. So that's certainly my Christmas snack of choice.
Yeah.
And then I'm a fan of a salted cashew.
Oh,
Yeah, very classy. So yeah, just something to little nibble whilst reading.
Now, Amy sent many questions, all of which were brilliant, and I struggled to pick which ones to ask from Amy. I've picked two because the first one's just a quick one. So, have you ever solved a Rubik's Cube?
No, I'm not that smart. I've tried and failed. I get frustrated after about a minute. I'm like, no, can't do it.
Same. And her second question is, have you ever read a book that has given you nightmares?
So the only one that springs to mind is the comic book version of The Walking Dead.
Okay.
Which is, I wouldn't suggest it because it's not age appropriate, but I do have a lot of zombie dreams.
Oh, really?
Just in general, yeah, I really love zombie comics and TV, but then I always have nightmares.
No.
Because I'm kind of terrified. It's this weird thing where I love watching them, but I'm also terrified. So yeah, if there was going to be something to give me nightmares, it would be zombies.
Okay, because I just can't. I don't watch horror, or because it gets stuck in my head, and I get horrible dreams if I watch anything scary. I am not brave when it comes to films at all. George asks, are you a harsh book reviewer?
So I'd say yes and no. In my head, yes. When I read books, I certainly know what I like and what I don't like. But I also love reading anything and everything. And certainly when I talk about books, I will always find the positives in them. And I love to give positive reviews. And when I enjoy a book, which I do a lot, then yes, I'm a very positive reviewer.
This is from Hannah. Would you rather it was raining cats and dogs or raining your favourite books?
That's a great question. I think I'm trying to think which would hurt most when they landed on my head.
I think would be.
They would both do damage. Yeah. And I'm also wondering whether if it's raining books, whether the books would be wet.
Oh, that's an interesting question because I've never thought about with that phrase. Does it mean it's also raining water?
I guess probably not. So if they're dry books, I think
it's implied it's just the cats and dogs, or there's no water involved.
Okay, right. Okay. Well, in that case, I'm thinking about this more than any other question.
No, it's good. You've got to how else to approach it, but very literally.
I think I'm going to say books because I'd worry about cats and dogs falling from that great height. I'm not sure. When we think about the phrase, we don't really imagine the impact.
Well, are they coming from the clouds still?
Yeah. Are they floating down on a little parachute? So yeah, I'll say books, and then I can set up a bookshop, and that would be wonderful.
Great. Also, I think that cats and dogs is more unpredictable. And I know there's different sizes of books, but like there's really different sizes of cats and dogs. And like it's one thing like catching a cute little kitten, but what happens if it's like an angry Rottweiler that lands on you?
And then if they're all landing at the same time, it's just going to be this massive cat-dog fight.
Yes.
It's going to be anarchy.
Yeah, actually, do you know what? Both of them I think dangerous, but I think that you might get into a very dangerous situation with cats and dogs very quickly.
Giving me a great idea for a new book there.
Well, you can thank Hannah from Year 5 for that one.
Hey Hannah, you're going the acknowledgements.
Yeah. Jacob asks, when you dream of a great idea, do you write it down as soon as you wake up?
No, and I always wish that I did. I'll wake up in the middle of the night, I'll be like, oh, that's amazing. That's a book right there, or that's what I need to do to fix this problem that I've been trying to solve in my book for weeks. I'll be like, okay, I should write that down, but no, I'll remember it. It's fine. Fall back asleep. Next morning, gone.
Yeah. Although
I never learn. I never learn.
That sometimes I write it down in my notes app on my phone, and I wake up and I look at it and I'm awake and I'm like, this is a terrible idea. Like, why did I think that was so good? I woke up one morning and I had this note, and it said, as book idea, all the famous Annas in history are the same person, which I don't know, it either is the best idea ever or awful, but like I was just like, oh, what? Also so egotistical that it's all Annas. Like,
was the same person you?
Well, I hadn't thought through
the logistics.
That literally, I had that thought, wrote it down in the middle of the night, and was like, what is this? But I think better to write stuff down. I write down stuff on my notes app, and I do think you get a lot of dross, but every once in a while I do come up with some, like, it's the plot fixes that you, just as you're falling asleep, you're like, that's how I do it.
Yeah.
That's the stuff you need to keep.
Okay, right. Going forward, I'm gonna do that tonight. I'm gonna put pen and paper by the side of my bed.
Just in case. Noel asks, in your opinion, what is the worst thing about school?
Oh, good question, Noel. The worst thing about school, I know in my primary school, the smell of school dinners really got me. The taste of them when you actually started eating them was fine, but the smell of the school canteen like sticks with me as a particular, like, this kind of wet cabbagey fart smell that it's just a school canteen smell. I've been in another school canteen since, and
I think it's like too many different kinds of food, maybe, or like
maybe.
But I bet it is a very specific smell, isn't it? But like you say, even if the food is good, which it actually often is in school, still this cumulative smell.
Although in some ways now, going back into school canteens, I quite like it because it's not a pleasant smell, but it's like nostalgia. It's like, this is the horrible smell I smelled when I was a kid.
And it is often the same, very much, the same smell. Saoirse would like to know, this is one of my favorite questions.
Okay, right.
Do you think you look better than your favorite book cover?
Great question, Saoirse. No, definitely not. I think you can see this face. I think book covers are one of the things that excite me most about books. I mean, there's nothing better in my mind than going to a bookshop and just browsing all the covers and just choosing something. I know, the old adage, never pick a book by its cover, but I think that's rubbish. I think on the one side, yes, you can have amazing books that don't have covers at all or don't have good covers, but I get excited by covers, and I love finding a new gem by diving in, seeing what the cover reveals. So I'm all for book covers.
I agree. I think one would have to be very, very beautiful to be better than the best book covers. They are some of the loveliest things in the world. But great question. And then the last question is from Chaldane, who asks, what is your biggest dream?
Oh, you know what? That's such a difficult question to ask, because in many ways, if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, my biggest dream was to maybe be in a TV show one day that I'd written, and to be an author of a published book. And I'm so incredibly fortunate that both of those dreams have come true. So I'm kind of living my dream at the moment. So I guess the dream would just be to continue the dream and to keep everything I'm doing going.
I mean, that's so. I like what. That's how nice to be able to say. How nice to be able to say that. I think that's lovely. Fab, right? Those are all the questions I have. So thank you to Year 5 from St Benedict's for such excellent questions. I have absolutely loved hearing Joseph's answers, and I hope that you have too. I am on the hunt for more classes to help me with future episodes of the Bookwanderers Club. So if you would like to send some questions, I will put where you can email me in the description box. So do get in touch. Thank you so much to Joseph for coming on the Bookwanderers Club. The Good Hulk is already out, of course, and The Broken Raven is out now. And actually, I should ask, are we gonna see more of this world?
Yeah, so there's a book 3 that I've just finished writing that comes out next January, I think, and that'll be the last one. So it's very much a trilogy. I say that now for accountability because I can't write anymore. But yeah, for now, yeah, it's 3 books to complete the trilogy.
How exciting. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been amazing.
So next up, we have an interview with Kieran Larwood. Now, Kieran is the author of the 5 Realms series. The first one, The Legend of Podkin One Ear, won the Blue Peter Book Award when it came out. And the new one in the series, which is the 5th book, is Uki and the Swamp Spirit, which is here. So I got an interview with Kieran now, which is a bit more like the interviews we did back in the first series of the Bookwanderers Club, where Kieran tells us all about his writing and his book. So enjoy.
So, hi, Kieran. Welcome to the Bookwanderers Club. Thank you so much for coming and being part of the first episode of the new series. It sounds very grand calling it a series, but I'm running with it. But thank you for being part of it, whatever I'm calling it.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So your new book, Uki and the Swamp Spirit, is the 5th book in the kind of 5 Realms world.
Yeah.
So I suppose to kick off, could you tell us a bit about kind of what that, like the 5 Realms, because series, but it's kind of like they're like linked books in a sort of series. So basically, can you explain that?
So yeah, well, the first 3 books deal with Podkin and his sisters and his brother. And they're in one part of the 5 Realms, and then books 4, 5, and 6 are with a different set of characters, Uki and Jory and Kree, and they're in a separate part of the 5 Realms, but it's still part of the same overall story. Especially because I wrote the first 3, and then I realised I'd called my world the 5 Realms, and all of those stories happened in one of them. So I thought, oh, I better kind of explore the rest a little bit.
Yeah, I love that though, but like it's nice to have that opportunity to have arcs within a kind of big world and explore different bits of it, and that must be creatively exciting for you as a writer to kind of be able to use this world but explore different corners of it.
Yeah, because I think I knew they wanted 6 books. I could have just carried on the story, but I thought it'd be really nice to kind of to build the world a bit and go and visit another part of it, make it different, and just I think there's a writer I really like called Robin Hobb who does that. She has one world, but she does a trilogy here and a trilogy there. It just builds like a really rich world with lots of different areas, and you can really kind of get into it more.
Yeah, that's actually like I'm doing the same thing with my book. So I'm just writing pages 4, but the 4, 5, 6 they're linked, and there's crossover characters, but it's definitely a new kind of corner, and it's really fun to be able to do that. So I'm a fan of series like that, and I'm a fan of writing like that as well.
It's quite refreshing, isn't it? Yeah, you get to go somewhere new and do something, but it's kind of still linked in. So yeah, it's nice.
Okay, so I'm going to address this because I have talked all over the internet about my dislike of talking animals in books, and but I've had to reconsider it, because when I read Podkin, I was like, but this is wonderful. And I think that I've clearly developed this prejudice. It's from like as I was a child, and I think maybe like I just didn't, do you know what? I just didn't like animal films as a child. And I think it's like I've carried it over into this prejudice about talking animals that I clearly need to revisit, because I absolutely loved reading about Podkin, and it's really made me need to eat my words a little bit, and it's perhaps not talking animals but just the stories themselves. But it does need that. I do need to ask you, why rabbits? Like why was it rabbits when you decided to kind of create this world? Why not humans, and then why rabbits specifically?
So I was kind of trying to come up with an idea, and you must know what this is kind of like, trying to think of something original, something a bit different. And I was just like really stuck, and I was trying all sorts of different things and they weren't working. And I love drawing, and I'm a massive drawer and doodler, and I keep all my sketchbooks. And then one day I was just kind of flicking through the sketchbooks I've had going back years, and I noticed that every now and then I'd like doodle a picture of a rabbit, but with like swords and shields, and it's made me think that there's a kind of like idea in my head. And I started thinking about I grew up in the countryside here in the Isle of Wight, and I used to like go for long walks, and I used to see these big rabbit warrens, these kind of big mounds of earth with all these little holes in, and I always used to wonder what was going on inside. So I started thinking there could be tribes living there, and there could be like little towns and villages inside. And I just kind of built it up from there, really. But I understand what you mean. I don't like it just having talking animals. There's a kind of reason behind it. They're actually they're not just rabbits. They're a kind of mix of rabbit and human DNA, and so they're kind of the creatures that took over the world after us. So they're kind of, it's not just animals that talk. So I understand where you're coming from.
Oh no, but I mean, I need to get over it, because clearly I'm missing out on wonderful books because of this prejudice. But I love this, like this whole a whole mythology, and I loved all the. I mean, part of the reason I really loved it was as well like the stories within the stories, which is one of my favorite things in books. The kind of frame of a bard telling stories to characters within the books, and there's a lot of little fun little like meta touches, and I loved all that. Again, like I'd love to hear about kind of why you decided to use that structure of having the storyteller within your stories.
I think just because I was really interested in stories and how we use them as a culture, and the things that they do, and the kind of magic they create. And also I was working as a reception teacher at the time. I used to spend a lot of my time. I think a lot of teachers in schools don't have time to sit and tell stories, and I think it's really important. And I used to do it a lot, and just enjoying the way I would sit there and with a little horde of children at my feet, and it's just magical the way you can take them off into another world, and the interactions you have. So I really want to kind of bring that into it and explore what stories do and how we use them.
Mm-hmm. Now, because Ookie and the Swamp Spirit is a new book, I'd love to just, it's hard to talk about later books kind of in the series, but can you tell us a little bit about the new book in particular, and kind of what readers can maybe expect to find?
So it carries on the story of Ookie, which started in Ookie and the Outcast, which was out the year before last. So what's happened is there's these kind of evil spirits. They're actually creations of the ancients, and they were imprisoned, and they've escaped, and they're kind of loose in the five realms. And Ookie and his friends going around, they've got to try and capture them. Ookie's got these crystals that can capture these spirits inside. And so it's the second of the spirits, and it's gone into the swamps, into the fenlands. And they're kind of loosely based on like the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So this is the spirit of disease, and actually I wrote it January before last, so before the pandemic even happened. And it's all about the spirit of disease spreading a plague, and Ookie has to try and stop it. So it's inadvertently it's become really relevant.
Topical.
Yeah. So he's there with his friends, and he's got to find the spirit and capture her to stop her spreading her plague throughout the five realms.
Amazing. So I think now might be a nice moment to get a little of a taste of the books. So Kieran is going to give us a short reading.
Yes, right. So this is when Ookie and his friends, they've gone into the swamps, and they're staying with, there's two kind of tribes that live in the swamps, and they're like kind of feuding tribes. They've got a big generations long feud between them, and Ookie and his friends are staying with one, the Girdles, and they've found out that the evil spirit is with the other tribe, and they're sneaking up to their camp to try and plan an ambush. Whose stupid idea was this? Jory said, drawing level with him. I think it might have been mine, sorry. Let's just get it over with and then get back to the village, said Jory. The quicker we're out of these fens, the better. A worrying thought occurred to Ookie. If it was this tricky to get to the mound, how were the Girdles planning to mount their great attack? He caught up with Rawny and asked her. We'll come at night, she said. We know the path well enough. By sunup, we'll be at the bottom of the mound. If that's where their maggots is hiding, then we just have to run up it and give them a good paddle whacking. Ookie was about to suggest it might not be as easy as all that, when something slithered through the mud in front of him, something big and wriggly. He let out a yelp. Just a hoppet, said Rawny, poking the mud with her spear butt. A slimy, long-legged creature burst upwards with a plop and then began to squirm its way to the nearest pool. Only a small one, too. It was the size of my head, Uki started to say, when he spotted a movement at the pool's edge. It had looked like a pair of eyes ducking down under the water, there for an instant, then gone. Any ripples that might have been made, disguised by those of the escaping frog. Did you see that? He asked, but everyone's attention was fixed on the muddy water in front of them. Just keep moving, said Rawny. We'll soon be out of this glop. Uki carried on, step by slurping step. He kept a careful watch on the water, though, and a few minutes later he saw the eyes again. This time it looked as if they had ears behind them, long ones, rabbit ones. There's something, he began to say, when a paw shot out of the mud beside him and grabbed his leg. Glopstickers, Hitch yelled, and then there were suddenly explosions of water and muck all around them as rabbits burst up from below the surface. Muggett's troops, Rawny shouted. They come from beneath the mud, bunched together. Uki had a glimpse of several mud-coated figures dressed in stitched snakeskin with some kind of masks and breathing tubes over their mouths. They had appeared from all directions, surrounding them completely. Jory had her sword drawn, and the others were brandishing their spears. Jory, he called, trying to move closer to her, but his leg was still gripped tight, right around his ankle. He strained, trying to use his strength to break free, but all the mud and water made it hard to get any traction. Just as he felt his attacker's grip begin to slide, another pair of paws grabbed his foot, then more around his waist. Just how many of these glopstickers were there? Uki flailed, feeling his legs slipping out from under him. He went down on his side, cold, clammy mud flooding into his clothes, soaking through his fur. He tried to stand up again, but the paws were pulling him backwards, downwards into the swamp. Jory was screaming, Uki! He had one last glimpse of her, struggling towards him through the marsh, her paw outstretched, and then he was dragged down, gone under the surface.
I don't know if that'll pick up because I heard there's a dog. I love that. It's too exciting. I want to go back because what you said about that you're a doodler, because the books. So we're going to come on to David Wyatt's sort of I would say like official illustrations, but of course the books are listed with some doodles, not doodles, I bet, because they're incredible. There's some drawings by you as well, and I believe you draw the maps as well.
Yes, yeah.
And I love a book with a map at the start.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, definitely.
Was that? I'd love to know, like, at what point do you have a map before you start, like a kind of core map before you start writing that you maybe add and tweak to, or do you write and then do a map based on what you've written?
Yeah, so I mean, back when I first wrote Podkin, I remember hearing about J.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit, obviously, and he said that he started off with a map. So that's what I decided to do as well. So I sat down here and I drew a map of the 5 realms.
Put this here. So that's the one from Podkin.
That's the original one, yeah. So I sat down and I drew like a rough version of that. And it was quite interesting, actually, because I found that I was just like making up bits and pieces and putting them in, but some of it actually informed the story and maybe gave me ideas of what to write. So now I have a kind of a rough map of the world, but before I start any book, I do sit down and I draw out the map and I put all the places in, and I usually find it kind of sometimes gives me ideas, or it might even like change what I've planned for the story itself. So it's a really good tool, I think, before you start writing. Yeah.
And of course the kind of, I don't know. I keep wanting to say, like, what David Wyatt illustrates the books. Does what would you say, the official, the main, the kind of big? I don't know. I don't want to finish your illustrations, but the other illustrations are done by David Wyatt, and they're incredible.
He's amazing, isn't he? Yeah.
Often double page, kind of black and white spreads. Do you? I'd love to know about kind of how that comes, because I know, as someone who is not artistically inclined, my illustrator, just creates these wonderful things, and I'm like, yeah, great. Because you kind of are arty and can draw, is there more of a communication, or is it still a similar thing for the kind of big pieces?
He always sends me through the roughs before, right. And I've got the chance to correct bits or change bits, but I hardly ever have to change anything. It's just he's got an amazing way. He just kind of like he sees into my head, and it's my favorite bit of writing the book, actually, when the illustrations come through, because it's just the visuals there of what I thought in my head. So he's amazing. Yeah, I'm so lucky to have him as my illustrator. Yeah,
he captures a lot of the details. Like, one of the things I loved the most was like all the kind of I guess like homey stuff, like imagining kind of how a borough would kind of operate and the different rooms and how they cook and the food. I just needed to, like, I didn't have it. I mean, that's a whole other thing, getting food at the moment, but
Oh yeah.
I just wanted like buttered, like root vegetable soup, like I was craving parsnips the whole time I was reading it. It feels like there's a lot of kind of pleasure taken in kind of creating those kind of more homey domestic details. Is that true? Do you enjoy that kind of element of it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all part of the world building, isn't it? You've got to kind of make it convincing. So I think that's in all the little details. So yeah, I sit down, I think of all the recipes and yeah, all different rooms, and we've got different styles of writing for different parts of the world. And yeah, David's great because he'll take that and he'll put that into different little bits, and he'll add little extra details in that I haven't even thought of myself. And it's just, yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice to kind of have a whole world you can build from the ground up.
Mm-hmm. I like, I'm obsessed with food in books, and it's honestly, I hate when, like, I like to know what people are eating. I hate when you read a book and it says that people have a meal and you don't get told what
Yeah.
it is that they're eating. And I suppose with rabbits as well, you kind of have the logistics as well of what they would eat and the size of things and how they might be able to cook stuff and what they kind of would cook and what they wouldn't cook. I loved all of that. I want a 5 Realms cookery book, please.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Spin off.
You mentioned that you were a teacher before you became a full-time writer, and a little bit about how that kind of impacted you in terms of the stories within stories. Are there other ways that you think that having come from a teaching background have kind of influenced you as a writer?
I think it's made me very aware of what children like to read and how they read books, and I think of how children today access books, because it's very different when I was a child. Obviously, there was no internet or computers or anything like that, and I think when I read books, a lot of the older books, when you go back and read them, they're kind of much slower to develop, and it's kind of a slower build up. But nowadays, I think children they're used to having everything very instant. Everything's on tap, everything's instant, and it made me aware of when I'm sort of planning a book, just getting the plot right and getting kind of good hooks in there and cliffhangers and lots of a good balance of action and things as well, just to keep them involved really and interested.
But I mean, you're so good at that. Like, when I was messaging a friend after I read Podkin, and I was like, it's just so well done. Like, it feels like I felt that, like, the pacing is so good and it's so well structured, and I really found it, as a reader and a writer, I just found it such like a delight to read. You've really, look, you've convinced me about the whole animals thing. Completely. You talked about reading when you were a child. Were you a big reader kind of as a child? What was your relationship with books, and what were some of your favorites when you were kind of the age of kind of the Podkin readers and 5 Realms readers?
Yeah, I was quite an early reader, and it was when I was about 6 or 7. I read the Hobbit. I found it on my parents' bookshelves, and that was the first time I kind of picked up a book that was set in a different world, and that had the map at the front and everything. And that just, since then, I've just loved fantasy books, and then all through my childhood, just devoured them, like the Box of Delights and Ursula Le Guin, and then as I got older, kind of things like Tad Williams and Robin Hobb, and yeah, even now that's still my favorite books to read, are really fantasy books. But yeah, I just loved reading. I spent hours and hours reading and drawing. That's all I did basically when I was a kid.
We just rewatched the Lord of the Rings films over Christmas, and it's given me a hankering to reread the book. I was really into Lord of the Rings when I was a teenager, but I haven't actually, because it's obviously very long, I haven't reread the book for years and years. But after the films, I was like, maybe this third lockdown is the time to get Lord of the Rings back off the shelf.
Yeah, it is a hefty book though, isn't it? Especially like the second and third ones are a bit slow going at points.
Yeah, there are a lot of I mean, I say I've read, like I'm not sure I've ever read it all the way through in terms of without skipping some of the songs and
yeah, there's a lot there. It's amazing though, isn't it? The way he's created it, like languages, and it's just incredible.
It is. I think it's unlike really anything else in that the depth of the kind of world creation.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going off on a Lord of the Rings tangent, as I am very easily convinced to do. So you mentioned that there's definitely a sixth book. So
Yep.
Are you able, what kind of stage are you at with that? Are you able to give us any kind of clues about what's happening next? I mean, I imagine, I can imagine perhaps some of the things that might happen, but could you tell us a bit about the sixth book?
So I'm just editing that right now. That's out in October, and that's kind of it's like the climax of the Uki story. So it's the end of Uki's adventures, and it brings it all to a head. He's going to go after the final spirit, who is in the kind of the main city in Holsland. So this one, I like, each book's got a kind of different setting, a different feel to it, and this one's got a kind of it's like a big medieval style city, so it's all about big Gothic architecture and stuff. Ooh. Like that.
That's very exciting. And I know that I always feel unfair asking this because I hate it when people ask me this, but post that, do you think that you will explore more of the 5 rounds? As you say, there are 5, or do you fancy kind of exploring something new, or also you can just say I don't want to talk about it?
I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say, but
yeah, I know how annoying though this is a question, but I have to ask it when I'm doing interviews. I have to ask it.
I think I can say I've got some other books coming out next year.
Okay.
But that's to be announced quite soon, I think.
Okay.
And then the 5 rounds is going to continue. I'm going to go back to Pogkin's story after Uki's is finished. So then because that wasn't quite finished at the end of the 3rd book. So
okay, so more on lots of different fronts. That's very exciting.
Yes. Yeah.
Now I've asked Kieran to have a think for any kind of young writers who are watching this, or readers watching this at home or at school. I've asked Kieran to think of a writing activity. So if you have been inspired listening to Kieran talk about his writing process and you want to go and do some writing of your own, Kieran has come up with a prompt for you to get your creative juices flowing. So Kieran, what's your writing prompt?
So for this book, I had to kind of write about these tribes that were living in the fens, and just to make them seem a bit more realistic and give them a bit more life, I came up with a kind of dialect for them. So they had different words for everyday things. For example, we had the word for big was girt, the word for frog was hoppet, and a grass snake was a hop snatcher. And it was really fun to kind of make those up. So I'd like you to try and think of some everyday words, think of some different words for them, and then use them to write either a scene with some characters talking, or maybe the beginning of a story. Get those words in there, and I think you'll find it's a really good way to make the world you're building seem like even more realistic.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, thank you. And if anyone does do some writing based off of that prompt, I have set up a new email address for the Bookwanderers Club, so I'll put that in the description box, and if you do any writing, I would love to see it. Please do email it to me. Right, there we go. So Uki and the Swamp Spirit is out now. Thank you ever so much for coming and being part of the Bookwanderers Club.
Thanks for having me.
So our 3rd and final author segment for this is called Where Do You Get Your Ideas From? Now, when I do events at schools or at book festivals, the question I get asked the most, and the question that got asked the most when we did the Bookwanderers Club live, was where do you get your ideas from? And it's a question that authors get asked a lot, but also think about a lot. So for this segment, I have asked authors to think of 3 specific things that have inspired their most recent books. So it could be a song, it could be another book, it could be a place, a person, anything at all. And I've asked them to pick 3 things out and tell you a little bit about how that item or idea inspired their most recent book. Now, the first author up for this segment is Nizrana Farook, who is the author of The Girl Who Stole an Elephant. And she is going to tell you a little bit about the 3 things that inspired her new book, The Boy Who Met a Whale.
Hello. My name is Nizrana Farook, and I'm the author of The Girl Who Stole an Elephant and The Boy Who Met a Whale. I'm going to tell you about the inspiration behind my newest book, The Boy Who Met a Whale. I have 3 things that inspired this book, and the first one is an animal. I'm sure you can guess what that animal is. The Girl Who Stole an Elephant features an elephant, as you can tell from the title. So even before I started writing this book, I began to think of what animal I should put in it. It had to be something comparable to an elephant in some way. So very early on, I decided that this should be a whale, specifically a blue whale. And the reason was that, quite simply, the elephant is the largest land animal, and the blue whale is the largest sea animal, and also the largest animal that's ever lived. So I felt that that was the right animal for this story. These stories are also set in Sri Lanka, or a fictional Sri Lanka of the past. And as it happens, there's only one country on earth which has both the blue whale and the elephant, and that country is Sri Lanka. So it all made sense to me, and I felt that this was the animal that I wanted to write about in my book too. Which brings me to the second thing that inspired me, the ocean. I was born and I grew up in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and all my life until I moved to the UK, I lived by the sea. One of the things that I found hardest to get used to in my new home was the silence, because that constant background hum of the sea was gone. So I wanted this to be a sea book. Then that gives me the chance to put in some interesting things like boat chases, maybe a near drowning, stilt fishing, a shipwreck, buried treasure maybe. And I thought, how fortunate was it that the animal I'd chosen happened to live in the ocean as well. The third thing that inspired this book is a historical figure. Admiral Zheng He was a 15th century explorer who travelled all over the world in his ship, even coming to the island of Sri Lanka, and interestingly to the very place this book is set in. In fact, about 100 years ago they found a stone tablet inscribed in 3 languages that Zheng He brought with him and installed in this particular town in Sri Lanka that my protagonist lives in. When I wrote this story, I wanted to open with a mysterious stranger who arrives by boat and is found by my protagonist. I thought I should give the stranger a really interesting, exciting backstory. So I made him someone who's travelled all over the world, seen a lot of weird and wonderful things, speaks many languages, and I called him Zhang. Now the Zhang in my story isn't actually based on Zheng He. They have quite different stories, but he was certainly inspired by him. There's inspiration to be found in so many things around you. I found mine in the places I've lived in and the things that I miss. Try to find yours. Who knows? You might even get a whole book out of it.
Now, of course, there are lots more books that come out all the time, and we've heard a bit more in detail from 3 authors, but I am going to tell you a little bit about some of the other books that have come out in the first half of January to see if any of them take your fancy. Now, the first thing I need to say is that this is a bumper edition of the Reading Roundup, and most of them will not have as many books in. A lot of books come out in January, especially the first half of January. So I'm going to show you everything I could find to make sure that you can hopefully find something that fits what you love to read. But yes, this won't normally be quite as packed in future episodes. I'm going to do them by alphabetical order by the author's surname, so have a look out to see if your favourite author has a new book out. And if you know they do, but it's not mentioned here, it's probably because their book is going to be mentioned in a bit more detail in the 2nd January episode of the Bookwanderers Club. So first up is This Wonderful Thing by Adam Barron, which is a new book from the author of Boy Underwater, and it's a moving, funny story about friendships, family secrets and hidden treasure. Morgana Made in the Robotic Age by Amy Bond, illustrated by Nan Lawson, is a cosy fantasy story about a witch who lives outside a city full of technology in a world where science and magic are never mixed and decides to try and get into the School of Robotics. The Ghost Garden by Emma Carroll, who is the author of Letters from the Lighthouse and Secrets of the Sun King, and this is illustrated by Kaya Kaifed. It's set in the summer of 1914, and it is a powerful, spine-tingling story about childhood on the brink of war, and it's dyslexia-friendly. Next up is Stick Boy by Paul Coomey, which is for fans of Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Tom Gates, and this is the first book in a funny, exciting new series about Stick Boy and the evil plan he uncovers in his new town. Once We Were Witches is by Sarah Driver and illustrated by Fabi Santiago, and it's the first in a new fantasy series for fans of Starfell about two sisters growing up at Miss Molehill School for Wicked Girls in a world where magic has been banished. Space Oddity by Christopher Edge, illustrated by Ben Mantle, combines science and laughs in this out-of-this-world adventure about a boy called Jake, his embarrassing dad, and the mind-boggling question of are we really alone in the universe? Next up is Everdark by Abby Elphinston. This is part of Abby's The Unmapped Chronicles series, and this book is set in Crackledawn, where a girl called Smudge and a monkey called Bartholomew have to set sail to stop a harpy who is set on stealing magic. Diagnosis Danger by Rupa Faruqi is the second in the Double Detectives Medical Mystery series about twins Ali and Tulip, who know all about being medics and something about being detectives, and this one is for fans of Shana Jackson and Robin Stevens. Pizzazz vs. the New Kid is written and illustrated by Sophie Henn. This is the second hilarious book in the new series from the author of Bad Nana, and it's for fans of Dork Diaries and Amelia Fang about a reluctant schoolgirl superhero. That's a Wrap by Gareth P. Jones is the last book in the super fun, action-packed series about Holly and her partner, dragon detective Dirk Dilly, who in this story are on the hunt for clues in Hollywood. Piracy, Paintballs and Zebras is the second in the new series by Cherub author Robert Muchmore, who takes the Robin Hood stories and reimagines them in a modern day setting in this action-packed, super readable series. Next up is The Worst Class in the World Gets Worse by Joanna Naden, illustrated by Rickon Perek, a hilarious sequel to The Worst Class in the World about 4B who can't help but get into trouble despite their best intentions, and this is one for fans of Pamela Butchart. The Valley of Lost Secrets by Leslie Parr is the current Waterstones Children's Book of the Month, and this is the story of Jimmy, who is evacuated to Wales during the Second World War and discovers the secrets of the village that he is sent to. A Vanishing of Griffins by S.A. Patrick is the second book in the Songs of Magic series about three friends who encounter the pirates of the Eastern Seas and visit a city where dragons and humans live side by side. The Boy Who Sang with Dragons by Andrew Shepherd, illustrated by Sarah Ogilvie, is the fifth and final book in the Boy Who Grew Dragons series. Thomas is now a fully fledged expert dragon grower, but a huge secret about his new friend takes him on a new journey. The House at the Edge of Magic by Amy Sparks is a magical story about an orphan pickpocket trying to escape her life in the nest of 1,000 treasures through a higgledy-piggledy house full of wild and wacky characters. Cat Wolf on Thin Ice by Lawrence and John is the new adventure about Cat Wolf and her best friend Harper, and this time they're on the winter holiday of a lifetime in this adventure full of intrigue, snow and husky dogs. Next up is The Graveyard Riddle by Lisa Thompson, and this is a second book set in the world of The Goldfish Boy, which is Lisa's debut. Now, this is a mystery about Melody, who discovers an abandoned house in the corner of a graveyard and a mysterious boy hiding out there who tells her that he's a spy in training. And last but by no means least is Effie the Rebel by Laura Wood, which is the sequel to Vote for Effie, which was shortlisted for the Blue Peter Book Awards. In this book, Effie is leading the resistance against a corrupt school council with her band of misfit friends and a bad-tempered parrot. Now, if you watched the first series of the Bookwanderers Club, you will remember that I asked all the authors who came on as guests to recommend one of their favourite bookshops. Now, we're taking that idea and we're kind of giving it a bit of a tweak, because each episode now I'm going to have a real life bookseller who is going to tell you about their shop and how and whether you can buy books from them during lockdown, who's going to give you their personal recommendation for one of their favourite books that has come out recently. So our very first bookseller is Helen, who runs the Barrister in Wonderland Bookshop, which is a gorgeous bookshop. So she's going to tell you about her shop and give you one of her personal recommendations.
Hi everyone, my name's Helen and I'm the owner and the manager of the Barrister in Wonderland Children's Bookshop in Retford, North Nottinghamshire. Our website can be found at wonderlandbookshop.co.uk, and you can contact us on hello@wonderlandbookshop.co.uk with any emails for recommendations or just to say hello. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about a new middle grade book which was published last week on January the 7th. It's called The Forest of Moon and Sword, and it has been written by Amy Raphael. I am so excited for the release of this book. It's the story of 12-year-old Art, and she lives with her mother in Scotland in the 1600s. Her mum is an amazing lady. She makes herbal remedies and potions to heal the sick, and then disaster strikes one night when, on a cloudless evening, her mum is arrested and taken away under suspicion of being a witch. Now, Art is incredibly brave. She's absolutely amazing. She grabs her sword and she mounts her horse and she gives chase through the forests of Scotland and England to chase after her mum. She's relying on the magic of the elements, of nature's beauty, of signs from nature, and of what she knows to find her mother and save the day. It's an incredible adventure. It's perfect for fans of Sophie Anderson's The House of Chicken Legs. If you enjoyed Sophie Kirtley's A Wild Way Home, then again, I think this is a book that you will really enjoy. It's so outdoorsy, it's thrilling, it's gripping, and I am so excited to be able to recommend this book to everybody. If you want to give it a go, we have got some signed copies available on our website, wonderlandbookshop.co.uk.
So I hope you've enjoyed this new format for the Bookwanderers Club. I have got loads of authors lined up to tell you all about their books over the next couple of months. As I've mentioned, I am always on the hunt for classes to help me with the big questions segment. So if you would like your class to send in some questions for an author, then there is an email address in the description. It's thebookwanderersclub@gmail.com. So get your teacher to email me and we can see who we have space for. If you do any of the writing activities, so we're going to have one writing activity every episode. So this week we obviously had Kieran's brilliant suggestion. If you do some writing because of Kieran's suggestion or any of the future ones, again, we would love to see it. Please email me at thebookwanderersclub@gmail.com. I would love to read your writing. So that is it for this episode. If you are a teacher watching, I would be so appreciative of you tweeting about this. If you've enjoyed it, use the hashtag Bookwanderers Club. If you are a reader, I hope that you've enjoyed finding out a little bit more about some authors, been inspired maybe, or heard about some books that you would love to read. So happy book wandering, and I will see you in 2 weeks' time.